Oedipus complex. Imagine this. You're 5 years old, chilling in your toddler kingdom, living your best life. And your mom is literally the reason for all this. She cooks amazing meals, gives you cuddles, and makes your boo-boos feel better. Naturally, in your tiny, undeveloped brain, she's the best thing ever, and you want her all to yourself. But then there's some tall dude with a mustache and a remote control permanently glued to his hand that's always there every time you try to be with your mom. It's like he's competing for her attention and time, and this is just unacceptable to you because, after all, mom is all yours. This is basically the heart of the Oedipus complex. A kid who's crushing on mom so hard he wants dad out of the picture like a bad ex in a rom-com. You see, Freud, the guy who came up with this complex, was a fan of Greek tragedies, so he named this psychological phenomenon after a Greek character called Oedipus, who unknowingly kills his dad and marries his mom. Talk about a plot twist. So, according to Freud, the idea behind this complex is that kids develop unconscious feelings of attraction towards their moms at ages 3 to 6. At this age, kids are figuring out their place in the family, their likes and dislikes, and apparently their secret plans to take their dad's spot on the couch and in mom's life. For example, the child might get a little possessive when mom and dad are hugging. He might push dad away just to have mom all to himself. According to Freud, this isn't just a cute phase, but the child's unconscious attempt to eliminate the competition. To be fair, Freud has a knack for turning every childhood milestone into a psychological thriller, and many modern psychologists think the Oedipus complex is a bit overblown, if not completely off base. Today, the child's behavior might simply be chalked up to attachment or admiration, not a subconscious plan to reenact a Greek tragedy. Inferiority complex. So you're at a gym and finally muster the courage to hit the weights section. But the moment you walk in, you see someone lifting what looks like a car. You look left and see another person lifting something similar to the size of 2 mini tractors. In fact, all around you, some men are built like they're a mashup of Hercules and The Rock. But as you glance at your 2-pound dumbbells, you immediately feel like an undercooked spaghetti noodle. So you quietly slink back to the cardio section instead. Now, that sinking feeling, the one where you feel smaller than a breadcrumb at an ant parade, is literally Inferiority Complex 101. Psychoanalyst Alfred Adler coined this psychological complex, and it's literally a cocktail of low self-esteem and constant comparison. It's like being in a race where everyone else is a Ferrari and you're stuck on a bicycle with a flat tire. Basically, an inferiority complex happens when you feel like you just don't measure up to everyone else. To you, everyone is bigger, better, and shinier than you. Now, people who experience this complex would constantly compare themselves to others and then try to mask or fix their feelings of inadequacy by going to extreme lengths to appear superior, confident, and successful. They are basically trying to fill a hole with glitter. It looks shiny, but the hole is still there. Sadly, this complex is often seen in people who were constantly compared in childhood or told they were not good enough. The funny thing about this complex is that Adler did not think it was entirely terrible. He actually believed that feeling less than could motivate you to improve. Twisted style of motivation, but a win is a win. God complex. Let's say you're in a meeting at work, brainstorming ideas for a new project. Now, everyone's tossing out suggestions when Steve from management enters, but instead of listening, he orders everyone to keep quiet and listen to his own plans. The worst part is he talks with so much authority that you'd think the heavens parted and angels whispered the idea directly into his ears. Well, what you've just met is someone who has a God complex, which is a mere mortal who thinks they've got the omniscience and infallibility of a deity, minus the celestial glow and free lightning bolts. This term describes people with an inflated sense of their own importance. They believe they are always right, rarely accept criticism, and tend to treat the options of others as mere background noise like elevator music. It's not just confidence, it's overconfidence on steroids. Think of it as self-esteem so high it's reached orbit, leaving humility somewhere back on Earth waving a little white flag. The insane part about people like this is that they may actually be very insecure. Deep down, they feel inadequate, but instead of admitting it, they slap on a divine persona like it's an invisibility cloak for their flaws. Peter Pan complex. So it's your 35-year-old coworker Mike's birthday. You stroll into the office expecting the usual adultish celebration, maybe a cake, some balloons, a polite clapping when Mike pretends to be surprised. Instead, you find him in a Spider-Man onesie, chugging Mountain Dew and debating the best Pokemon starter with the intern. This is literally what a day in the life of someone who has the Peter Pan complex is. A full-grown adult who refuses to grow up. A psychologist named Dr. Dan Keeley came up with the idea and refers to adults, usually men, who cling to their youthful habits and have no sense of responsibility, maturity, or bills, and would rather remain in Neverland, where staying young forever isn't just a dream, but a lifestyle. Well, you can already guess where this complex got its name from. And if you don't know, it's from Peter Pan, the fictional Disney character who refuses to grow up. Think of it as adulting allergies. They break out in procrastination and denial at the mere mention of stability or commitment. Peter Pans avoid long-term relationships or commitments like they're dodging pirate ships. The idea of settling down feels like a trap, and people would spend all their time chasing flimsy passions rather than paychecks. In fact, these guys are ready to quit or leave a job if it starts to feel too adult. Normally, this complex is often seen in children who grew up in overprotective households and their parents handled everything, so they never got the chance to develop the skills needed to navigate adulthood. Then there's the fear of failure, which every serious adult faces. Basically, adulthood comes with risks, especially with jobs, relationships, and mortgages. Some people avoid these entirely, preferring the safety of their childhood comfort zone, which is a silly irony because that in itself is also a failure. Jonah complex. Let's say you're a skilled artist who really knows their onions. Your work could honestly rival Picasso, and then one day someone walks in and sees a stunning painting you made. Instantly impressed, the person suggests you should have your own gallery, but you're suddenly horrified instead of being flattered. You're already going through a million reasons why that would be a very bad idea. First of all, you're convinced that no one will show up, and even if they do, they will completely hate your work. So you start mumbling excuses that you're not that good or that talented to have a gallery, and just like that, you've bolted faster than Jonah when God sent him to Nineveh. That's right, you've got a case of the Jonah complex, where fear of success keeps you from unleashing your full potential. It's not about failing, it's about worrying that success might be too big of a beast to handle. This complex was named after Jonah from the Bible, who was supposed to deliver a big message to the people of Nineveh, but instead of stepping up to the challenge, he ran the other way and ended up in the belly of a whale. Apparently that's what happens when you ghost divine responsibilities. In short, the Jonah complex is the fear of stepping into the spotlight because you think it might blind you. People with this complex fear the expectations that come with success. If you succeed once, people will start expecting you to keep succeeding. It's like winning your first marathon and being asked, "When's your next one?" Martyr complex. Basically, the martyr complex isn't about heroically saving a village or throwing yourself in front of a train. Instead, it's a mindset where you feel compelled to take on unnecessary burdens, often while silently resenting others for letting you do so. In simple terms, it's when you make yourself the unpaid intern of life, constantly doing more than is asked, needed, or even healthy. Now here's the thing, this complex isn't always loud and dramatic, but more like a passive-aggressive shadow. You'll volunteer for tasks no one asked you to do, then feel bitter about the lack of gratitude. You'll always play the victim by emphasizing how much you sacrifice for others, often to earn sympathy or recognition. And the worst is, even when people offer to help ease your huge burden, you'll always refuse because you're convinced they won't do it right. The crazy thing about having the martyr complex is that you actually secretly enjoy the struggle because it reinforces your role as the overworked, underappreciated hero. However, like any psychological drama, this complex often stems from deep emotional roots. Someone with low self-esteem or worth might become a self-imposed martyr to seek validation from others and prove their self-worth. If people praise your efforts, it reinforces the idea that suffering equals value. Martyrs also often believe that no one else can do things as well as they can, so they take on everything themselves. Sadly, while constantly playing the martyr might earn you some sympathy points, it can also lead to excessive burnout and strained relationships because the people you are always sacrificing for may feel guilty, annoyed, or smothered. especially if you keep rubbing it in their faces. Messiah complex. Thanksgiving is finally here and you can't wait to meet up with all your cousins and enjoy really good food. But there's one uncle you're absolutely not looking forward to seeing because he just gets on your last nerve. It's not as if you hate him or anything, it's just that he has a way of acting like he's better than everyone else. This guy would literally jump into situations no one asked him to, then try to hijack the whole conversation and give advice on things he has absolutely no idea about. Unfortunately, what you don't know is that this uncle has something called the Messiah complex. Also known as the Savior complex, which is absolutely fitting, the Messiah complex is a psychological mindset where someone feels compelled to rescue others, even when their help isn't wanted or needed. It's not about altruism or genuine kindness, it's about them. Deep down, they're driven by a need to feel important, validated, or downright divine. They'd swoop in with solutions to problems you didn't even know you had and have absolutely no respect for people's boundaries. The worst part is that they won't even offer their help quietly. People with a Messiah complex always want to be praised publicly, shown gratitude, with preferably a standing ovation. People who always feel the need to save someone are probably trying to distract themselves from their own problems. It's easier to save someone else's ship than patch the holes in your own. Sometimes it's just a case of really inflated ego and the delusion that they are the chosen ones, sent to Earth to guide the rest of the hapless mortals. Medusa complex. You see, in Greek mythology, Medusa was cursed with a head full of snakes and a gaze that could turn anyone to stone. But peel back the myth's layers and you'll see that Medusa represents more than just a scary lady with a bad hair day. She symbolizes the fear of being gazed upon, judged, and reduced to an object, something many people with this complex can relate to. At its core, the Medusa complex isn't about vanity or arrogance. It's about vulnerability and the deep-rooted fear that people would see them as unattractive and unworthy. Those with this complex often hyperfixate on their appearance, overanalyze social interactions, or put up an emotional stone wall to protect themselves from vulnerability. If you have this complex, life would feel like a constant spotlight where every action, word, or imperfection is scrutinized. This relentless gaze that is often imagined would become so overwhelming and lead to behaviors that mirror Medusa's isolating curse. People with the Medusa complex often obsess over their looks, convinced that every flaw is magnified under an imaginary microscope. A smudged eyeliner or an uneven hairstyle can feel catastrophic, as if the world is secretly judging them. They fear rejection so much that even the simplest compliments are deflected, and criticisms, no matter how mild, would make them feel absolutely worthless. Now, to protect themselves from these, they often build an emotional fortress and create distance between themselves and others, making genuine connection difficult. While the Medusa complex may act as a shield against rejection, it often becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. By closing themselves off emotionally and projecting their insecurities onto others, individuals can push people away, not because they're being judged, but because they seem unapproachable. Don Juan complex. So you're at a party, and this guy who looks like he just fell out of the front pages of a Playboy magazine struts in. He's dressed to impress, has his shirt unbuttoned just enough to reveal a hint of a gym membership, and has cologne so strong you can smell it before you see him. He glides through the crowd like a shark in a school of baby fish, flashing winks and tossing compliments like confetti. And by the end of the night, he's handed out enough phone numbers to start his own call center. What you've just witnessed is the Don Juan complex in action, a psychological tendency where a person is obsessed with seduction and romance, but runs from actual commitment like it's chasing them with a chainsaw. These guys are basically attracted to the thrill of romantic conquests and are charmers, seducers, and heartbreakers who are less interested in love and more interested in the chase. It's like they're competing in the Olympics of flirting, where the goal is to have as many numbers or flings as possible. But as soon as things get serious, they'd vanish faster than chocolates at a kid's party. The whole idea is to get temporary ego boosts from a growing fan club of exes who might still be crying into tubs of ice cream. However, the true reason is always mostly a deep sense of insecurity. Beneath all the charm and bravado might be a fear of inadequacy, so by constantly seeking validation through romantic pursuits, they distract themselves from their own inner doubts. They also fear being vulnerable, so getting close to someone means risking heartbreak. And some Don Juans would rather run than feel real emotional intimacy. Sadly, someone with Don Juan complex may feel emotionally isolated even though they're constantly surrounded by admirers. They crave love but sabotage it before it can grow roots. The good news is that with self-awareness, therapy, and a willingness to confront your fear of intimacy, you can replace your fleeting thrills with genuine connection. Cinderella complex. So, for the past 3 months, you've been sitting on your bed whining endlessly about how broke you are. But instead of getting up and applying for that dream job or starting a business, you're just patiently waiting for a man to swoop in and give you the princess treatment. Sounds familiar? Well, this is because you have something called a Cinderella complex. The idea that some people, especially women, feel a deep-seated reliance on others to solve their problems or give their life purpose. It's named after Cinderella, the fairy tale heroine who goes from scrubbing floors to royal palace, thanks to a magical makeover and a prince. The complex doesn't mean you're sitting around literally waiting for a prince. Instead, it highlights a fear of independence and a tendency to believe happiness or success can only come from external sources, usually a romantic partner. You'd also avoid all responsibilities and leave the tough stuff to others because, let's face it, adulting is hard. However, the Cinderella complex isn't about laziness or lack of ambition. It's actually a lot deeper than that. There's the cultural conditioning that you see in many fairy tales, movies, and societal norms that has historically reinforced the idea that women need saving. For every Mulan fighting her own battles, there are 10 Snow Whites waiting for a kiss to wake them up. But the problem is, if you're always waiting for rescue or for someone else to take charge, you'll never learn, grow, or discover your own strengths.